It's close. It's Comier, but it's close. It's good. It's
Good universal time, Luna. Thank you for having me on.
I'm doing. Yes, it's about 7 o'clock in Santa Fe. It's an uncivilized hour, but we're happy to be here. Oh no, it's my pleasure. Pretty much every day. It's yeah, I live on the internet sometimes. Sure. Excellent.
Just a guy. No. Thank you for having us on the show. Well, for the last 2 years or so, I've focused much or most of my life on the situation in the Gaza Strip of Palestine. And for me, it's not just something which is, of intellectual intrigue, trying to understand what's going on, but also it's a passionate, heartfelt connection to the place. And I first visited the Gaza Strip last summer. And I've traveled there 5 times now and spent several months living and working intensively in Gaza. I won't speak for Denny, but Denny and I first met this summer in 2013, so we actually know each other, and we went to Gaza together on the Welcome to Gaza convoy, which is an initiative of mine and my Palestinian colleagues to bring sympathetic individuals to Gaza to work very intensively again, to see the reality and depict it and show it to the world, to raise awareness about the injustice that is afflicting Gaza. So for me as a filmmaker, activist, I'm working generally in the field of making documentary video reports and such. And I guess that's it. I think it was July 20th. Yeah. It was, yeah. What happened in my case, which is actually the same case as Denny, so I can speak for Denny in this respect, is that we left Gaza having finished the program, this media-making delegation convoy program, at the end of July. And certainly in the case of me, but also Denny, as far as I can remember, we were both hoping to return to Gaza very imminently. And for one reason or another, but most particularly, the reason was because of the Egyptian treatment of the border with Gaza and the geopolitical reality of Gaza and Egypt now. And since the ousting of Morsi on July 3rd, we couldn't get back into Gaza. And so that's our case, really. Yeah, I think that's how I feel about it. It's not. I wouldn't say government is necessarily the right word. I mean, the way I describe it is it's the security apparatus that are responsible for this most directly.
No problem.
Yeah, you can say, I guess, Luna, being locked out of Gaza kind of pissed me and Denny off.
Oh, it pissed me off a lot. I had an apartment waiting for me in Gaza, and unfortunately I had to give it up. But that will change sometime in the future, inshallah. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, I think. I feel quite passionately about this because actually I see it from an Egyptian point of view, and I have some sympathy for some strands of the Egyptian narrative in terms of maintaining security in North Sinai. I mean, the area has been a total mess and disaster for years. So wanting to secure a region next to Palestine, next to Israel, is something which should be a priority. In a way, I do understand some of the background to the Egyptian position. But, everyone knows and everyone could have predicted that there would be dire consequences for Gaza as a result of the destruction of the tunnels and the simultaneous closing of the border. I mean, it's just, it's a man-made disaster.
Yeah. For years, Gaza depended on what was coming through those tunnels for a reasonable level of life. Those a couple of hundred tunnels provided what wasn't coming through from Israel. Israel had put a good many challenges to things coming into Gaza, something as simple as pasta at one point in time, and chocolate, and other things that were really required for normal life in Gaza. They were shipping or allowing shipments to come through the borders from Israel, but it was hardly enough to supply the needs of Gaza, including building materials, which were heavily, they were stopped from coming in, and that caused great problems for Gaza when they were trying to rebuild after Operation Cast Lead and this past year with Operation Pillar of Cloud. So those tunnels did provide a lifeline. Actually, probably pretty good business for Egypt as well.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. That's exactly what people say. This is the single logical chain that people use. They say, "Oh, we don't have enough people," you know. Well, actually, it just happens to be the largest Arab country, you know, in the world. Why do you don't have enough people? I mean, it's just ridiculous. I mean, maybe they don't have enough people, so they need to get more. It's just you just want to bash your head against a wall. Um,
I mean,
hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
go ahead, Harry.
no, go ahead, Denny.
I was going to say, having been through that border and all the security checks that happen at that border, they're not bringing guns across that border. I mean, there may be somebody. I mean, it takes hours to get through. We, as a convoy, happen to be given some priority treatment, but I see people waiting there in line for hours, especially Palestinians, before they can go through that border. So the level of security is tight enough there, I would say, to prevent um, let's say arms and any type of material that could damage. Now it's possible somebody could go through, but they have lists. They question people. I wasn't questioned, and nor was my convoy, but certainly people are well checked before they're allowed to go into Egypt. So I've never really understood the closing of the border based on security.
People cannot hear. The person who is speaking now, we cannot hear the questions being asked. Just wanted to let you know. Okay. Looks like they can't hear you, maybe.
Hello? Okay, now can you hear me? I don't know what's going on with this.
Yeah, you're going through now to the live stream.
Okay. So now everybody can hear me? Well,
Yes, they say yes.
okay.
Can I just say one thing, about the border? The thing here is, unfortunately, because of the culture of corruption, Palestinians have had to, those that can, be able to exit into Egypt from Gaza through paying people off. It's not. It's definitely not a democratic system. Even on the Palestinian side, you cannot say it's exactly purely democratic. It's just such a mess. It's such a mess. The situation should be that the border is open. It should be open for pedestrian and economic traffic, and that would be to the benefit of a very poor region of Egypt, the North Sinai, and to the benefit of Gaza. But there are so many details to the animosity towards Gaza. The feelings of, in a way, almost hatred of Hamas and of, Islamist manifestations of control. And even it's got to the stage where some Egyptians are ready to articulate, or trigger happy to articulate, that it's just Palestinians' fault. It's not even the Hamas government. It's just Palestinians. They're terrorists. And that, I just said a moment ago, wants to make me bash my head against a wall, but it really does, because Palestinians in Gaza are getting it from both sides now. And really things have got really, really worse. I think, just one political note, of course it was not wise for the government in Gaza to in a way kind of marry Morsi, because now Morsi's gone. They've now had a very ugly divorce with Egypt, and that's bitten Gaza on the arse.
Right. Well, the thing is that you know as well as I do, especially, within the West, people will know that, if it's one person's fault, it's everybody's fault. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, in the Western world, that's the way it is. So that shows me a little bit that these governments between Nutty Yahoo over on one side and then CC Bend over on Egypt's side are listening to maybe Western governments, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And trying to cater to them, because the fact is that, and I hate to say it this way, but this is the way it is. You two know as well as I do is that the governments sit there and play a whose balls are bigger game while there's other people suffering, and
Exactly.
I don't know. It needs to stop. People. When it does start happening, then people need to start voicing, because no matter where you are, because it does affect us. It does affect us. It affects the whole world. People might say that the United States it rules the world, or Russia, or all these bigwigs. No, it's not. It's the Middle East. And when it comes to the Middle East and things happening there, the whole world gets really fragile. So the people need, they need to start speaking, not be rowdy or whatever, but just speak on behalf of each other. I'm amazed of how Gaza's not coming up as much. You know what I'm saying? There was other things here in the U.S. that are really lame that were coming up, as, people are having a hard time in the cold, snowing in the Middle East, and these people suffering like that.
Well, the reason why, sorry to talk again, I can't stop myself.
No, it's okay.
But the reason why is because, according to a commercial or a corporate news definition of news, it's not news. Palestinians are suffering in Gaza. Who wants to hear that? That's what the editors think and say. that's what people think. It's totally cold. It's stone cold.
Yes. And the mainstream media, when they do cover it, it's like this big, you get people. I had people in Israel tell me, well, Pollywood. And I says, well, you all should know. I mean, you learn from the United States, my country, so yeah, I'll admit that. I said, but the thing is that you need to start listening to the people instead of having your face in your TV all the time, because you all know, you've been there. The media portrays whatever the governments want it to portray.
Mm.
And if you don't listen to each other and they can't get along with each other enough to speak with each other, I mean, the internet is a big place. I've seen a lot of little cyber fights, about topics. But that's what needs to be done so we can you know. So I'm
You
hoping.
know,
Go
I was
ahead.
going to say, if it wasn't for the internet, I probably never would have gone to Gaza. Listening to the mainstream media, I had no business going to Gaza, and even in discussions with family and with friends and with coworkers before I made the trip with Harry and the others, it was like, why would you want to go there? I mean, it's, you're going to get bombed, you're going to, I mean, the level of disinformation was extremely high. And yet when I arrived in Gaza, I said, this is not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
I mean, the internet did allow me to know a great deal about Gaza before I got there. Connections with people who live in Gaza, students, mothers and fathers, all kinds of people that I met were giving me a totally different picture of Gaza. I remember watching Anderson Cooper reporting live from the top of a building during Operation Pillar of Cloud, and saying, "Oh, I'm not sure that I really want to go there," and yet at the same time I did. But again, the level of disinformation is very, very bad. I was speaking with an activist yesterday who was concerned about going to Gaza because he wouldn't be able to take photographs because the Israelis that were in Gaza would prevent him from taking photographs. And I said, there are no Israelis in Gaza. But he didn't really know that. So this information is, or lack of information, period. I don't know about, I think all three of us probably depend on the internet to really know what's going on. In my case, that is 5 or 6 minimum chats a day with people who live in Gaza City or Khan Yunis or Rafah, who say, this is what's going on. Help us. Is anybody listening?
Right.
Is anybody listening?
And it's pretty sad that, I mean, it's cool that we have this and people are able to do that, because I mean, I can start a Twitter storm within seconds, and people having to help people this way is good, but it's sad that we do have to do this when we've got mainstream media that could do this, and help. When the flooding started, I was like, well, y'all don't have, Middle Eastern CNN, or, we tweeted out to a lot of media. We had a Twitter storm for the mainstream media, wondering why they weren't covering it, I mean, I just changed this over, guys, to the video screen so that our viewers can see.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can see that.
So that our viewers can see the flooding in Gaza. And I mean, even before this, and that's what I kind of want to go into also, is the conditions before the flooding. I mean, this flooding just made life in Gaza and the Gaza Strip worse. To our viewers that are not really familiar, the Gaza Strip was limited on to electricity and fuel even before this flooding started, because of the blockade on both the Israeli and Egypt side. so much to the point to where they had to shut their power plant down. The flood didn't make the power plant go down, and that's what I want to ask you both,
Mm.
starting with whoever wants to answer first. What do you think of the fact that when the mainstream media does come up, or people who just want to try to ignore or pass the issues in Gaza by, are bringing this flooding up and totally forgetting about what was going on even before the flooding? What What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
Well,
for,
go ahead, Harry.
yeah, no, I was going to say, for me, I mean, it's unfair. Unfortunately, it's what I said before, that it's not news, so they won't cover it because they assume that people already know that there's a blockade and that there's a resource, electricity shortage, and etc. And it's so difficult and frustrating for me because I just want to talk about the political reality because we know that these humanitarian crises, these resource shortages, this economic squeezing is a man-made disaster, and we can point the fingers. So it becomes very frustrating for me. But yeah, I mean, talking about the situation before the floods, sure. I mean, for years, there hasn't been normal grid electricity supply to Gaza. Depending on the neighborhoods, maybe you have it better or worse, and there are schedules. So at least people can usually expect when the electricity will come. Sometimes the schedules are pretty weird, and it's difficult to work out why the authorities or the electricity authorities have chosen for these particular times. But the point is that when things are a bit more regular, at least you can try and build a life and a schedule around the restrictions. But what's happened in the last 5 or 6 weeks with the fuel shortage and the electricity power station shutdown is that basically life has stopped. And just forgetting the practical and the logistical, this has basically hit people over the head in terms of a morale knocker. Things were bad enough already and people had just adapted to this. But suddenly having the electricity turned off, it was in a way kind of, I'm not going to say the last straw, but it really, I think a good way of describing it is it really pulled the carpet underneath people's feet. And people have been trying to battle with that reality, battling with depression. And generally the population is already depressed enough, as any population would be under the circumstances. And with all of the medium and long-term effects of the warring and the economic gloom, people are suffering from traumatic stress disorders. And then there are these, pronounced crises like we've seen in the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's, I just dealing with people on a day-to-day basis in Gaza. I'll give you a typical example. A friend of mine who's 27, he's a grad student. He has a son, a baby, and wife, of course. And they have no refrigeration for probably 80% of the day. They depend on space heaters to heat their apartment. And of course, without electricity and the temperatures as low as they've been in the last couple of weeks, it is winter now in Gaza. Winter for them is not quite as low as it is for me. They may not have 18-degree temperatures like I had last night, but 30-degree temperatures are extremely cold in Gaza. So you're trying to raise a child, and you have no electricity. You have no lights for most of the day, which means that you're burning candles. If you're lucky, you have a UPS system which provides maybe several hours of power occasionally if it can charge long enough. My friend for 2 or 3 days at a time had no electricity at all. And when there was electricity in the home, that might be quote unquote for 4 to 6 hours, the electricity often went off even within that 4 to 6 hours for 20 to 30 minutes at a time. So the situation is quite challenging. The other thing is that many homes in Gaza that are more than one story depend on electricity to pump water to their water tanks, which sit on most of the houses in Gaza. Imagine also those people that live elderly, who live in the 8th floor of an 8th floor apartment, who have no elevator, who cannot get out of their apartments to get water, who, because they have no refrigeration, can't get out of their apartments on a daily basis to buy the groceries that would otherwise spoil if they bought a week's worth at a time, like I might do. So the daily challenges are, which, by the way, nobody ever complains about. I know Harry's been there. People in Gaza don't complain.
They just
they endure. They endure.
right.
They endure. They have a positive attitude. Now they may suffer, and they do suffer, but they endure. Sorry, Harry. What were you going to say there?
No, it's nothing. I was all I was gonna say was that having talked around the world about the endurance, or having alluded to it like you just did, I've had people say to me, things like it's because they're Palestinian, their brains are wired specially, that they don't complain, or because they're Muslim, their faith prevents them from complaining, and various bits of analysis and etc. And I think there's truth in all of these bits of analysis, but for some in Gaza, for them, they feel that it's just a matter that they're humans and it's just a survival mechanism. And
Yes.
I can see that. If you complain about everything, your mind will break down. So in a way, it's kind of just a human thing. I feel.
Yeah, I do too. I'll tell you that when I talk with Gaza on a daily basis, one of the first questions out of their mouths is, "How is your health? How are you doing? Are you getting sleep?" The people that I know and love worry more about me than they do about themselves sometimes, and it's kind of a unique situation that blew me away when I first encountered people in Gaza, on the ground as well as on the internet. Is that, geez, they're worried more about me than I am about them some days, and it's easy to love people like that. It really is.
Yes, I know. I have a friend there, close to the Israeli border, and when I speak with him, it's like I can hear, drones or jets going by, and I'm going, "Is everything okay?" And he says, "Why are you so scary? Don't be scary." He said, "This is normal." he says, he says, he says, "I can't sleep if I don't hear it." He says, "So let them just go."
When Harry and I were in Gaza, we stayed at the Adam Hotel, which is a hotel that is on the beach in Gaza, and fairly central. And on the second day that we were there, I woke up early. We would generally wake up in the morning and gather and have breakfast and have a discussion about the filming work we would be doing that day. But nobody was up, just myself. I woke up very early and I heard explosions that kind of frightened me when I heard them. And they actually were shelling of fishing boats offshore, but they were loud enough that they got my attention. And I said, okay, the next thing that's going to happen, a missile is going to come through the ceiling of this hotel. That was my immediate American reaction. It really was. But then I looked out the window and I saw a couple of hundred children and their mothers playing on the beach early in the morning right outside the hotel. And I didn't see the mothers screaming for their children to get out of the water. It was it was a normal fact of life on them,
When I interviewed Hannah Shalaby, the famous female Palestinian hunger striker who ended up being exiled to Gaza, I think that was last year. I can't remember now. Anyway, yeah, it was last year. And while we were doing the interview, there was an airstrike probably about 400 meters. No, it wasn't that close. I guess it was within 1 kilometer, let's say. And it was so loud that her windows, her curtains blew in, like not totally off the wall, but they blew in, like a gust. and it was so a total shock to me. It was one of the first times. This is way before the war, actually. So this is one of the first experience of an F-16 payload being dropped on Gaza that I'd seen, and she literally didn't flinch. And she carried on talking in the interview. I was like, guys, like, what's going on here? You know, like, we have to stop. And it was like, no, just carry on, you know. I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I haven't been to Gaza. I wanted to go to Gaza with you guys, actually, and that I couldn't do it. It wasn't possible. But I know when I first got to Egypt, I was doing the same thing. And I'm from, like, one of the most violent cities in the United States. And when you hear a boom, you just duck and weave, you know. So my first my first couple of weeks, especially when the revolution started, oh my Lord. I mean, I was like ducking and weaving all the time. And they kept on telling me, just relax, it's just a firework. I was like, damn, that ain't no firework that I've ever heard. Not that close, you know. So it took a while to get used to the different things, and they just stand there like there's nothing wrong, you know. So I do understand that, but I'm like, Harry, when Operation Pillar of Cloud was taking place,
Mm.
and I'm just going to take that. I stayed right with you, okay? But I'm just going to take this time to tell you personally, because I haven't never been able to tell you, is thank you so much for everything you did for Gaza then. Um,
I'm gonna ditto on that.
Well, that's
I'm
sweet,
gonna have an
but
absolute ditto. You know, they.
you brought, you know, I know you'll be humble because I've seen you do it before. I've watched you on other interviews, and your humbleness is it's overwhelming, amazing to me. But the fact is, Mr. Fear, is that you did a great service for just Gaza, but for the world to know exactly what was going on. And you did it without grumbling, and I seen you not have sleep. I seen you and heard you while you were sitting close to where places were being bombed. Um, so yes, I feel that
thank you.
you take that and be proud of that. Um,
Thank you. Well,
You know,
when
yeah, all I would say is that uh, being able to help people know what's going on is why I first went to Gaza. And you know, with the live stream and etc. I never thought that it would be so useful. Actually, I never thought that so many people would tune into it. But being able to help people understand what's going on, that's magical for me. I mean, that's the reason why that's my whole thing. So I mean, the key here is thanks to you guys and thanks to everyone else who also tuned in and for their moral support, because this is a human exchange. This is a human intercourse. I mean, it can't just be done with one person's effort, and I couldn't have done it without everyone's support. So anyway, let's start talking about that.
Okay.
But
well, yeah, I just would like to comment on just quickly, and I don't want to have Harry blush. That there were things that happened during that period that were not strictly a news report. There was a level of engagement with the people of Gaza during this crisis that I had not heard before on a news report. Even just to the very fact that Harry was willing to read the names of the dead.
Yep, I was just.
And yeah, and this was engaged reporting, reporting with love, I would say, although that may not be how Harry would describe it, but it's how I described it. And like you, Luna, for 8 days, I slept when Harry slept. I woke when Harry woke as much as I could, and woke up every couple of hours because I wasn't a voyeur. That was not why I was there. I was there to take that information that Harry was producing and sharing, and share it with other people. I remember weeping when I first saw the naming of the dead. Um, it made it real. It wasn't just the typical news story that I hear, that 5,000 people were killed in a hurricane in the Philippines, or there was some passion there, and Harry managed to maintain his composure through this whole thing. But frankly, I have no idea how he did it. So, anyways, I'll shut up about that. But to me, it was what tied me to Gaza, and I don't think I will ever lose that connection again. But it started by accidentally bumping into a little tweet that said there was an attack in Gaza, and I went looking for someone who could. Maybe there was a live feed. I was used to live feeds during the Occupy movement out of New York and other cities, and there was Harry Fear, and sitting in an apartment with his computer, broadcasting to the world what was happening there, and frankly, no one else did it quite as well or as passionately. Amen.
Amen.
So, thanks, Denny. Sorry, but
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I feel very uncomfortable.
That's all right.
Okay, it's okay.
No,
We'll get off that. We'll get off that topic now.
No, it's okay. No, I understand it's an important time for people, but I just going back to the flooding and etc. One really kind of hot thing, and someone's mentioned it in the live stream chat, is about how the flooding was caused and the possibility that Israel caused the flooding and etc. Well, my personal analysis of this is that obviously there was a regional weather crisis, and the general reason why Gaza was flooding was, I personally, based on the information I know, I don't believe it was because Israel flooded Gaza. At the same time, there is one report which says that Israel opened dams or discharged water which went into Gaza. I think that's quite possible. I mean, looking at the geography, but I don't think it's a smoking gun that Israel flooded Gaza, which is, I know how some people have taken it. This is all a red herring, because we'll never know if Israel deliberately flooded Gaza or not. The key here is that if, as the UN spokesperson said, if Gaza wasn't already blockaded in all of the different ways it's blockaded, it would have been able to deal with the flooding from the get-go. And, the authorities did very well, as I gather, to deal with it, putting into practice emergency response protocols, although we didn't hear about them for days because the efforts were going, let's say, on logistics rather than communications. But that there was a good response, but it would have been much better if there hadn't already been a blockade.
Right, because there had been, I was doing a little bit of research, and there has been flooding there before, but like you said, Harry, yeah, and that's what I want to stress, today too, and talk about is, the blockade from both sides of the Gaza Strip. I mean...
Yeah, there's a third side. The first side is Israel. In fact, there's even a fourth side. The first side is Israel.
Okay.
The second side is Egypt. The third side is the world which basically doesn't do anything or agrees with the treatment. And the fourth side is in terms of blockade on the people of Gaza. There's a fourth side, and that is the political, democratic blockade on the people of Gaza. The blockade that says, no, our disunity amongst our factions is more important than you get to vote and have an election. And it's true that the elections in Palestine that took place 7 years ago now were free and fair. But that's 7 years ago. No one in the world would accept that as a standard for democracy. And I personally don't lay the blame at the feet of any faction in particular. I think that in a way, it's a culture of impunity that this is allowed to continue. You know, whenever I or Denny or another activist, whoever, like Palestinian, non-Palestinian, mentions the issue of disunity in elections, there will always be one person that blames Fatah or blames Hamas or blames whoever or Israel. But the point is that it's all of these entities' fault. For Israel, the disunity is a deliberate policy to gain power by dividing and ruling strategically. But I find it very frustrating that Palestinians are living in a really multi-dimensional blockade. It's not just this physical, economic one, it's also this political one.
Okay. Now, what I want to ask you, and is because I am kind of confused, what about, how do the Palestinians on the West Bank get along and support the Palestinians that are in Gaza? Now, what I've seen, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is what I've seen from my little that mainstream won't say, and I have a feeling you're going to agree with me here, okay? That when there are the so-called rockets, fireworks, whatever, thrown at Israel, okay? When something like that happens and they're not actually clashing or anything from the West Bank, do they support each other? Like, say, if something happens to Palestinians over onto the West Bank and bulldozers are taking people's homes, will the people in Gaza react to that? I mean, how is their relationship as far as solidarity and support for each other?
You know, I can speak to this a little bit because I've had discussions recently. I needed education about the various factions, and I didn't want to get it off the internet, so I spoke with people
Right.
who gave me information. I think on a people-to-people level, there is some solidarity in being a Palestinian, in being in the same situation, although there's a different set of circumstances at play in the West Bank than there are in Israel. I mean, the people in the West Bank are living among Israelis, and there are soldiers there, and there's quite a challenge to living normally. However, I think it's, as Harry said, it's more in the politics where there are the greater differences. The struggle for power to lead the Palestinians is probably as great a factor as any. I've not had the opportunity to go to the West Bank, but I've met people in the Hamas, in the government, in Gaza. You know, I don't have an answer. I'm not a politician. However, I think that the people that I've spoken to would hope one day that there was some unity between the West Bank and Gaza. I don't think there's a hate relationship at all on the people-to-people level. Matter of fact, many people in Gaza have relatives in the West Bank, and they can't visit them easily. If you're over a certain age, you don't cross the border. If you're under a certain age, you don't cross the border. The restrictions are horrific. If you're about ready to die, you might be able to get across the border a lot easier if you're lucky. The restrictions are quite intense. So the ability to communicate on the internet or by telephone and other means is okay, but your grandfather may have died on the West Bank, and your chances of going are slim to none. And so I don't think the people have as big an issue as they do with the fact that their governments aren't speaking to each other. And of course, that plays right into Israel's hands, divide and conquer. I'm saying this very simplistically There are people that could talk for hours about the political situation and do a much better job than I could ever do. Someone said the other day, I saw a quote, it's not a matter of one state or two states, it's a matter of people. Um, and the political issues kind of get in the way of normal life in that part of the world.
Okay.
I think there's very, very good unity between the West Bank and Gaza. Forgetting the factional, as Denny said, and looking at the people, there's very, very strong unity. I mean, there are weekly demonstrations in Gaza for the prisoners issue, and of course there are no Israeli prisons in Gaza. That's an issue which is certainly geographically more tied into the West Bank, once or twice I've been asked to give a talk in the West Bank about Gaza, but I think that's fairly exceptional. I joke about it in a sense, but I think generally people know exactly what's going on. And if you look at the general culture of connection between the two territories, the West Bank and Gaza, I think to me, certainly in terms of the popular conscience in Gaza, people absolutely know what's going on in the West Bank, and they feel it as much as if it were in Gaza. That's the key. So I think it's an absolute connection. And it's more than that, because when, let's take one example, when Obama visited Israel, for example, rockets were fired from Gaza into Israel. If something happens in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem or in Israel, which the militant groups in Gaza take exception to, they will fire rockets, regardless of whether anything's changed in Gaza or not. So there is still that kind of connection with the universality, I guess.
Right. That's what I was pretty much thinking, because I noticed that, if something happens really bad in the West Bank, then I've seen a little bit of reaction, or not a little bit, but I've seen reaction at certain points in times. That's why I asked that question. And my question was more not as far as the political governments, because like I said before, this activist right here, she don't like the way the governments act, any of them. And I tell them all to go to hell, So basically what my question was is for the activists themselves, or just the people. And I guess from hearing you both, from being there and seeing it, that I'm kind of right in my thinking, that they do and sometimes do respond to each other's suffering, which is a good thing. I wanted to...
I think, I was just going to say, I think that what I've heard from my sources is that there would be a desire for unification at some point in time. They're aware of the challenges that are associated with the unification. There's been a lot of hurt on both sides, and there's been a lot of killings on both sides over the years, and so it takes a while to get over those issues, which are very, very real. When you talked about the rockets, which I personally think are counterproductive, but that's my personal opinion. I kind of understand why they're shooting them off at times. I live very comfortably and safely in my little apartment here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I haven't lost a brother because of an attack. Right. I haven't lost my home because of an attack. My cousin's family wasn't wiped out in an attack. Even if the attacks were not intentional, I don't have to live as the Palestinians live on both sides with personal injuries that sometimes take years to reconcile with. I met a boy in Gaza who I was asked to tutor in English, and I hope to tutor him one day when I return to Gaza. and that young boy who's about 13 will probably teach me English. And was walking. I mean, Arabic, I should say. I was walking. I was walking through the streets of, I believe it was Jabalia, with him, and we were walking with a friend of ours, and the three of us, all of a sudden, he pointed up to a sign that was over the street, and there were three pictures of martyrs. That's very common to see in Gaza, is to see pictures of those who have died or have been martyred. And he said, and I knew that he was an orphan, and he pointed up to the one in the middle on this huge banner in the street and said, "That's my father, Denny. That's my father. He was a martyr." And you know, I want to be a martyr like him one day.
Yeah, that, I mean, that is what
that
gets
is
me.
that is not what I wished for him, and it's not something that I would hope he would have. I'd like him to grow old with children surrounding him.
Exactly.
But the reality is that that particular situation had a massive impact on his life. A child that probably is suffering from the realities of PTSD, as I would say, and I've read that probably more than 50% of the children in Gaza, and Gaza is primarily children, are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. And those, as are their parents in many cases as well. And I'm not pointing the finger at a country, Israel or whatever. I'm just saying that they've gone through some situations in the last many years that that make it difficult to just be nice and say, okay, it's over, you know, all is forgiven, and we can reconcile with Israel, and possibly even reconcile with the other political side. But by and large, I find that people want that unification, because they want normal lives,
Right.
and they're not living normal lives in Gaza right now. They live as normally as they can, and life continues even with blackouts and whatnot. But there's a lot under the surface that'll probably never hit the media. Probably should hit mental health centers, which are minimal in that part of the world, and so that many of these challenges to life and to dealing with other people can be resolved. I found that Gaza people are very loving people, extremely loving people, very accepting, very generous. But at the same time, they deal with an underlying memory of things that I didn't see when I was in Gaza, and I hope that I will never see in Gaza again.
That's what we're here for. Talk all you want to. You two fit right in with me, because I can gab and gab and gab all day long. Luna's always got something to say, even if it's bad or good. Got something to say. But somebody in the chat has something to say, so I'm going to give this question to you both. What would your advice be to activists around the world to make a difference?
Shall I take it?
So, you can start, Harry.
I'm going to try and hit it for 6, Denny. The answer is that the most important thing is to accept that something has to be done, and that we all have a responsibility to do at least something, and that it's not an option to turn off. It's not an option to sink into passivity, inactivity, and despair. It's not an option. And there are many different things that we can do, including increasing awareness and reducing the stigma and the taboo and the stereotype surrounding Gaza. And that itself can be done sitting in an armchair, as I often say, on the social media. And I think particularly in the US, where there is definitely still a way to go in terms of combating the very simplistic images that people have of what's going on there. I mean, they don't even know where there is when it comes to Gaza, right? That is really useful. I think in Europe, people already are basically fairly developed in their sympathy towards the Palestinians, but often there's the "but what about the rockets" line. So it's different in different places. Social media is very important, but I feel that if we're to make a real change, there has to be organized campaigns. And one of the most obvious ones to mention is the BDS movement, which seeks to morally separate and exceptionalize and denormalize Israel for its actions, which is a fairly basic but obvious thing to do. Obviously, most people aren't doing it, and we hope that more and more will. Another thing, though, that I feel passionately about is bringing, in as much as is possible, bringing the issue of Palestine back into the fold. And I'm not sure what capacity there is in the US to do that, but certainly in the UK or Europe, there really ought to be election time red lines set about policy towards Palestine and Israel, and it ought to be politicized in our Western democracies, because unfortunately this is not just a micro issue between Palestinians and Israelis. It's obviously not, most obviously because of America's support and British support. So this is unfortunately a global issue and responsibility, and we all have to do what we can do and be innovative and strategic and smart about what we do. It shouldn't be an emotional experience. It should be a helpful experience.
Exactly. For as far as, uniting as a one hand of activists, even activists here, I'm sorry to say, but living 2 years in Egypt through the revolution there, and then coming home, and it's, how do I want to say this? Because I don't want to say it rudely, but I want to make a point. I come back and I tried to be into the Occupy movement here, okay? And I brought with me, because I lived 2 years of Egypt, and it was just like there was most of the occupiers were not wanting anything to do with Egypt. You know what I'm saying? We're working on this, or and that's fine, but we got to multitask here, You have an organization here that you say has inspired you to start a movement of your own a year later, and they're still suffering. So can we put them in every month or once every 2 months or something of this sort? And there was clashes at that time, and I took it really, really personal. But then I started understanding and seeing, the shit that's going on here in the U.S. too. And the thing is that, the United States, our government tries to make us look like we're all that, and we, have it made as far as freedom and rights. But the truth is that little by little, more than what Americans really want to acknowledge or admit, our rights and freedoms are going to hell because nobody will stand up, long enough. And so the one hand, I think if I would have never been in the Middle East, I wouldn't have really understood what one hand is.
I was going to say I was heavily involved in the Occupy movement. Not just in Santa Fe, but nationally and internationally, probably as a helper in the spreading of data and spreading of news from one to the other. But I wrote something yesterday is that the Occupy movement was pretty heavily geared toward U.S. issues, whether they be financial, political, social. And although there was connection with the international community, it was fairly much an inward-looking, inward-gazing kind of movement in the United States. Now there are exceptions. I know many people that were extremely international focused during the Occupy 1 year, but it was a challenge. When I returned from Gaza, I was kind of in culture shock a little bit because I was heavily invested in Gaza for 3 weeks and actually heavily invested in Cairo, where Harry and I stayed waiting to get back into Gaza for 3 weeks. We stayed about a block from Tahrir Square, and the experience was definitely a life changer. But there is a really lack of knowledge in the United States. I mean, you asked the question, what can an activist do? I tend to be a social media activist because, unfortunately, thousands of miles away from Gaza, and Egypt and Syria, which also we could do several programs about. But I was like a fish out of water when I returned to the United States, realizing that most of my connections in social media were suddenly in Gaza and in Europe, and I rarely got a comment on a post that I would make about Gaza from my own friends and activists in the United States. It was initially a little bit discouraging, but I said, well, that's one of my jobs, and one of several other people's jobs is to build awareness. I was at one point in time, a friend of mine said, your Facebook page is sort of like the Gaza Gazette. And I said, well, somebody's got to do it, and I'm one of many. There are many really inspiring activists in this country, some of whom I know, some of whom I have yet to meet, but only know their posts. But I'm just going to jump out of that a little bit and say that something that can be done is people-to-people contact, which I find extremely important. After Harry's marathon 8-day coverage of the occupation Pillar of Cloud, I really wanted to connect with Gaza, but you're an American, and how do you go on Facebook and say to someone else, hello, who lives 7,000 miles away from you, or 8,000 miles, whatever, and really make a initial people-to-people connection? And then a young 17-year-old student from Khan Yunis got on the horn with me one night and said, hi. And I realized after that few initial conversations that maybe I shouldn't be so shy. I have Facebook, I have Twitter, I have the world of communications and Skype. Why don't I start making some friends in that part of the world?
Yep.
And I did, and I was amazed by the experience. Harry, I don't know if you've shown clips from it, because I keep moving off of the live feed here and looking at some other things while we're talking. But Harry did a documentary called "The Killing of Hamid."
Yes, that's on.
That was one of the causes of the war. And the night he released the film,
not the making of the film, right?
No, when he released the film, I think in April, the day he did, I also began sharing that film widely on the internet. And within about 10 minutes of releasing that film, I was friended by a young man in Gaza whose name was Daga. It didn't ring a bell with me that it might be connected to Hamid Abu Daga. But the young man came on to chat a few minutes later and said to me, do you know very much about about Hamid? And I said, I don't. I said, I know what I know from the film that I've just seen, and I am totally moved by that the experience of watching that film and hearing that story. I feel connected to that young man for some reason, and the man on the young man on the other side of the internet connection said, well, that's my brother. He died in my arms.
Oh.
there's nothing like the people connection to really let you know
Mm.
feelings,
Exactly.
reactions, emotions, what is behind the flood. I'm going to say one more thing and I'll shut up because I don't want to dominate this conversation.
No,
But
don't.
about 7 days ago, um, I met a young man in Gaza through the social media and through messaging who came and saw some post of mine, friended me, and immediately went into chat. And we spoke for about 2 hours about the situation in Gaza. He lives in Jabalia, which is a refugee camp with many, many thousands of people living in a very small area. And he was talking about his school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we had a good conversation. And about 2 days later, he came back on chat. And he said to me, I spoke to my mother about you and my brother. And, we want you to live with us when you move back to Gaza. Now, this young man and his family are quite poor. Their belongings are mattresses, pillows, blankets, and a computer, which the mother bought for the young man so that he could get an education and go to the next level. But here's a family that had virtually nothing that was welcoming me into their home, and they said, "We'll take care of everything for you."
Mm.
Wow.
I mean, people-to-people connection is extremely critical. It will take a while. When I was in Gaza and spoke before members of the Hamas, and I know Harry's done this before too, when they ask you to give your opinion on various issues, they said, how can we change the image of Gaza in the West? And I said,
Mm.
well, your people have to take control of the story. They have to create the story. And so Harry and myself and several others, our friend Eileen Carr from Dublin, are trying to listen to those stories and trying to share those stories in the West because they're real stories.
Yes.
I mean, they're stories that should be on CNN.
Exactly.
But they're stories that are being shared privately with people who want to listen to them. And I feel an obligation. I know Harry and Noor Harazin, Joe Catron from the United States who's living in Gaza, and several others are trying to share those stories.
Hundreds, even hundreds.
Yes, I mean, really, I mean, yeah.
I mean, it's just
The
incredible the
American public,
number. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
No.
so making friends in Gaza would not be a bad start for an activist
Right.
who's
For
interested
sure.
in that part of the world.
Yeah, and
Amen.
it does make a difference. Amen. And it makes a difference because human connections are what make the world go round, and that without that connection, where does the motivation come from? It comes from something which is very abstract, and that's less powerful. Yeah.
And I think that's where the media wants to leave it, is abstract.
Yeah, well, the thing that gets me is that, as far as my answer as an activist would be is, be if you're an activist and you're active with the issues and the topics in Gaza, you need to be that candle, and a candle that doesn't burn down, because it's going to take a lot to get through some people's head that Gaza is part of the world, because everybody else seems to be ignoring them, that Gaza is a part of the world, and be that candle and light another candle and another, have that one light another one, and just keep going, you know.
Mm.
Um, Unless you've been to the Middle East, when you talk to some activists here in the West, and I'm sure Denny can vouch for me on this from exactly what he said, unless you've been to the Middle East and you've seen it's very easy to ignore, because on a basis of this happens all the time, oh well, that's normal. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
But as an activist, you have to keep on and let them know, no, this isn't normal.
That's right.
This is not normal. It's been happening for this many years, that's not normal. The
Yeah, yeah,
normal,
it's not fate.
exactly,
It's not the way it should be.
right.
Exactly,
And
and it's about. Sorry, this
it's
is
okay. Go
for
ahead.
me. It's about the application of standards. It's not acceptable that this is the way it is, and if we have the power to try to change it, we should.
Right, and that's what the governments are doing. And I'll just say it right out because I don't mind bringing up any of their asses. This is the way it is they want the people to just think that this is normal and we'll just deal with it and live through it. Well, it's not normal. And
Absolutely,
the
absolutely,
the longer
and
the people don't, the longer the people sit in silence and just do what they want us to do and say, okay, well, this is normal. Okay, Gaza's getting bombed again by Israel, hell. You know, then we're doing exactly what they want them to do, want us to do.
absolutely, and yeah, for me, another thing which I found interesting to think about and feel is this idea of steadfastness with the Palestinians. Because why should Palestinians be steadfast? Why should they have to endure this? Why should that be fate? And, I'm sure Denny and yourself and others I see on the social media, Palestinians posting, we have the power to change this, and we must rise up ourselves. And these kinds of concepts, and I find that really interesting because part of feeling the suffering is to try to understand and sympathize with how people are dealing with it and how it affects their hopes and the way they see the world and their role in it. And it for me is something critical really to the situation and to reality, and for Palestinians, their relationship with their role and their empowerment or disempowerment or illusionment or disillusionment, and how they are or are not contained by society, by culture, by government, and by the occupation. I think that we have to be sensitive about all of these things. And,
Exactly.
there are some youth in Gaza who feel very strongly that they are dominated and kept in place by, a kind of invisible, I don't know how to describe it eloquently, but a kind of invisible brutality by the government of Gaza, akin to that of the PA security forces in the West Bank. And there are others who definitely don't feel like that, who feel that the government of Gaza are doing a sterling job in maintaining society and cohesion there. And so there are various different reactions at spiritual, psychological, and political levels. And in a way, I guess that brings me back to saying, well, it would be nice to know what the majority of Palestinians felt by having an election.
Yeah. Another thing that I wanted to bring up also, though, is that in all fairness, um, as we speak of the people in the West, Palestinians in the West Bank rising, and then the Palestinians in Gaza rising, there are, and this is another thing that mainstream keeps from us, unless you search for it and you look for it, there are Israelis that are in Israel that rise up and say you're wrong. There just ain't enough of them um, to make to make the mainstream media. That's how I feel about it. That's my personal opinion. But out of all honesty and fairness, there are Israelis that do. There's few of them, but there are Israelis who do stand up and for the Palestinians and the misconduct.
Yeah, I know I just rambled for 5 minutes,
It's
but
okay.
I
Go
feel
ahead.
very strongly about this as
Go
well.
ahead. Go ahead.
Of course there are only a minority of Israelis. Of course they're not the majority. And I don't mean this to you, I mean this generally rhetorically. Of
Mm-hmm.
course they're in the minority, because in the UK there is a minority of people who stood up to the invasion occupation of Iraq. And there are a minority of Muslims who stand up to the oppression of Muslims in the world. It
Exactly.
unfortunately is always a minority. And it's trying to make things a majority, and that is a universal human struggle for every injustice. And there are there are millions and infinite amounts in the world, but it's about apathy, and it's about trying to get people to care and to wake people up.
Well, what I've been doing also is that, with being as blunt and forward that I am, I bitch out the Israel government when it comes to Gaza all the time, but I also do it to Hamas and to the other leaders of Palestine on the West Bank. But the thing is that people need to, whether you are an activist or not an activist, the discussion for the people need to come on. We have more than enough technology in this world. A revolution was started in Egypt on the internet. So there is no excuse for anybody to say we didn't know about this. And also when you're on the computer, you can agree to disagree. I've been to a lot of groups, and I stopped going to them. I stopped being part of them. Indian debate, Israel and Palestine debate thing. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, you get in there, and it's like a box. Is like you're going to get your ass kicked, but you're walking in there anyway. And I've tried this, and I mean, it got to the point to where I was getting messages of death threats and everything else. And I said, well, you better bring it on, because I'm like a cat. I got 9 lives, and when I get back up, we might both of us go down the next time. But in a way, it's kind of, if the drama, Facebook drama, and I got an award. I'm give my awards for the Facebook drama and the no replies, because I have to force myself to do that, because even if someone disagrees with me about it, at least they know something. They're getting, they might try to win or the debate or whatever, and call me all kinds of names, and I'll say, okay, you can put 2 B's in the bitch, just as long as you listen to this point I'm trying to make. So as far as people getting to talk to each other about the issues, and not just the Gaza issue, any issue, any issues that, our governments are going to try to divide us. There's 2 ways of them doing that: race or religion. As far as I'm concerned, all the saccharine stuff, that's a war tactic. That's the best one they can use to get people to start fighting with each other and divide people. But if we start, realizing and keeping an open mind to these kind of things, and still be able to talk to each other, we might agree or disagree, but if we disagree, we agree to disagree, and that's it. But we, at least both sides were being listened to. You go away with knowing something that somebody else feels. This needs to start happening. I mean, and what we can do to campaign and encourage that, I'd be more than willing to not sleep for days on end to get it started. What do you 2 think about something like this?
I was going to say, one of the things that I try to do, and I don't know about Harry, because that part of his social commitment I don't know, but I kind of avoid the hardliners a little bit, because although I do want to learn, I don't want to be attempted to be beaten down just for the sake of being beaten down. And what I'm learning here in the United States is that social media is changing. Let's just look at Facebook. And in my own experiences, although not every one of my roughly 1,400 friends, quote unquote, or many followers respond every single time I make a post or share something that I think is important that other people know, many see it. And the use of social media for social issues is an evolving thing. This weekend, for instance, Harry and I and Eileen Carr from Dublin, who's a passionate activist for social issues, we spent several hours, I believe it was Saturday, and we went on a marathon, individually but together, supporting each other, to bring knowledge of the flooding to the mainstream media. And we did, I don't know, maybe 300 or 400 posts altogether during the day, at least to make an attempt to bring the news to the mainstream media. I mean, it was a little act. we 4 or 5 hours that we got involved, and we don't really know the full impact of that effort. We'll never know.
Hmm.
But at least we make an effort, not just to communicate, which I think all of us do. All of us spend a lot of time on social media. That's not all we do, but it's something we can do every day. We can't give a speech every day. We can't be invited to. We can't be invited, like as Harry will be invited to Malaysia very soon, and he did his world tour. We just don't have those opportunities every day, but we do have an opportunity to share the news as alternative journalists. Now, I'm not even going to say that I'm anything like a journalist. However, I can play a role of a journalist, much like you do, Luna.
Yeah.
Domingo. I mean, we can do, and we really don't know what the full impact of what we share is going to be.
Absolutely, and often even we don't get feedback, but we know people are watching, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we sort of do it on faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we do get feedback, and most of us know now that it's not going to be an overnight change, but we do see changes taking place.
Right. Didn't we
We
just?
even in the United States government is suddenly, although they're providing a lot of money, are questioning the potential of this having gone to an apartheid issue. And I mean, there is stuff happening in the United States right now, and it's not just happening because of me or Harry or you. It's happening because of a lot of factors going on. But one of those factors is that there's a communication of the fact that there's an apartheid state at work here, and if not truly fitting all the characteristics of, let's say, the South African apartheid issues of the past, there's something wrong. There's something rotten going on here, and I'll say it. And I'm not I'm not an anti-Semitic person. In matter of fact, for those that know my list of Facebook followers, 50% of them are Jewish. That have been significant parts of my life over the years. So my issue is not with Israeli people. It's not with Jewish people. It's not with the faith. It's with policies that have affected not only Gaza and the West Bank, but Syria, Jordan, Iran, many other countries. So I don't know where I was going with that, but I hope I shared something that might be helpful.
Well, the thing is a lot of people, we, especially in the Middle East, have always been, it's like a domino effect of each generation. Everybody is supposed to hate this religion or that religion or this, Israel or Palestine, and I think we've come to a time, and that's going to start it up already, that the people are going to start saying, we want something more than just what our fathers and grandma told us we had to do.
That's true. That's true.
We see that's wrong, and you've got a little bit of people that are starting to rise up and say, you're wrong, we don't want that for our future. And I truly have a feeling that there's something coming, and it's going to be a big change. And all these old timers who want to still keep up with policies that were back in the Jesus days are going to get popped in the face with the new generation of youth that says, we don't want this anymore. I don't want to, live and not be able to have any kind of freedom. You know what I'm saying? And I think we've seen that with Egypt when they started, and everybody was like, oh, well, the Egypt revolution is what started it. And I'm like, no, it's not what started it. It's not what started the rise it wasn't even Tunisia. I said, if anybody out of any country or any people has been in an Egypt situation, it would be the Palestinian people. They've been like this since 1947? Trying to,
this situation, as far as the young and the changes of thinking, I think is very realistic. Um, if I look at Gaza specifically, with a 35 to 40%, it varies in terms of the statistics of the young people or the people who are employable not working, and the bulk of those are under the age of 25. These are people who want to lead normal lives, who want to marry, and yet they can't marry if they're not working. They can't marry necessarily if they're living at home. Most of them live at home. And they want more out of life than they're getting under the current situation. And although they may not know how to organize themselves, and they may never organize completely in Gaza, there is an underlying feeling is that, we want to live life. I want to get married. I want to have 5 kids. I need to support those kids.
Just 5?
Well, I mean, in Gaza, more like 8 or 10.
I'm joking.
I mean, the families are very large in Gaza, and
I have 14, and that's good.
I was privileged to meet some of these families, and they love their children, and to marry in Gaza, to marry in the Muslim world is everything.
Yeah.
And to raise a family and to have children is something really major, and you can't do that. You also, some of the younger people, because of the internet, are being exposed to Western culture. Something as simple as the hip hop culture, something as simple as the breakdance culture, which is exciting for them. It's exciting for them, and there are challenges to that because of the older thinking, and they're saying, well, kind of expand your thinking a little bit, because we want a place in the world. I love the Islamic world, and I hope to spend a great deal of time in that world, because I personally feel very strong about the family values that have been lost in my own country, the connections between people that I don't even feel, when I came back from Gaza, I felt like, whoa, the isolation that I've been used to is not what I experienced in the Muslim world. And I miss that. I miss that a great deal. But I think these young people, I think they will bring new light to this situation. And I agree with you. I think it's going to change. Unfortunately, I think we'd all like it to change tomorrow. I think my friends in Gaza would love to be employed.
Well, I think what it is that, these kids are ready to go. These youth are ready to go.
Oh yeah.
What they're waiting for is some of the, older generation to support that, and to get some kind of support, because if they go on their own to try to get governments to really listen to them, what are the governments going to do? Like they do everybody else, kick you in the ass and send you over in the corner for a few minutes. Especially in the Middle East, where they have to be scared to say anything, to tweet something or do something on Facebook. What they need is the activists and the people of the world to support them, to be able to give them the inspiration, the confidence to do it anyway, and say, if you do this and you exercise these rights and you ask them, we're standing right beside you in solidarity, and
That's
show
important.
it. And that's very important. If that doesn't happen, then they're not going to move on. They're going to go back and they're going to say, well, and I'm going to use my own experience for example. I came back from Egypt to the United States to tell my fellow activist people here and American people, the protesters in Egypt want you to do something to stop the aid in Egypt. And everybody just kind of looked at me, huh? I was like, can you ask, can we start some kind of campaign to stop the aid in Egypt? Well, what do we want to do that for? Because the activists in Egypt want you to. And they only asked for a year for it. But this is the kind of thing I mean. People need to start taking something that somebody says and actually giving a one hand, because the truth is, and I'm just saying this in general to all of our listeners, to everybody, the truth is that things might seem all fine and dandy if you're an activist within your movement now, but at one time or another you may need an activist from Gaza, or you may need an activist from the West Bank, or you may need an activist from the other side of the world. And when it comes your time to need for them, or from them, they're going to look at you and say, kiss my ass. What did you do for us? You know, we called, made a call out, and we didn't hear nothing from you. And now you want something for us? And that's the kind of attitude between people, just in general. It doesn't matter whether you're an activist or not. The world of people has lost their empathy for anything.
Yeah.
And the ones that you do find with empathy are very few. And I don't, unless the ones with the empathy, those of us that do have the empathy, start bringing our voice up loud as thunder, we're not going to catch nobody's, we're not going to catch nobody's attention. But we need to support these youth and let them know that, because they're ready. I can feel they're ready. I see it all over the world. We've got clashes going on today in Egypt again. We've got clashes going on in Russia, London, I think. Harry, are they protesting there?
In West, right?
They're protesting there in London, aren't they? Or in London?
About what? You mean in generally?
Just generally.
There's always some demonstration about something. There's nothing particular at the moment, though.
Right. So,
actually, but the point is that I agree with you that there is a bubbling. There is a bubbling among the youth of discontent.
Yeah. We have one more question. I don't know. We've been on for quite a long time, guys, and this has been such a good... I told you I was open-winded.
And thank you.
And I love listening.
Thank you so much. It was really good.
We got one more question here, and if you guys want to go a little bit longer, we can. If you guys are ready to wrap up, let me know. I'm cool with whatever you guys want to do.
There's one question, Major.
Yeah, it says, does armed resistance worsen the international solidarity and support?
I've got an answer for that. The answer is that the armed resistance, if we mean about the rocket firing, there's no, specifically, if that's what we mean, there's no doubt that definitely has a downward pressure on, more quantity and quality of international support. However, general armed resistance support, which doesn't have to be illegal, doesn't have to be terroristic, doesn't have to be controversial, I would say that there are a hell of a lot of people that for them, their support of the Palestinians is almost quite oriented around that, because it's quite exceptional. It's quite exceptional to see armed resistance against such hegemony and such, in such an asymmetric situation. If that makes sense, I hope that makes sense. So I think that it works both ways. There's not an easy answer to that. If we talk about it at a larger level, I think that it's fairly obvious to anyone, looking at the geopolitical situation, that if there weren't rockets fired from Gaza, there would be more solidarity. But who's to say that there just wouldn't be another pretext to delegitimize Gaza and blacken Gaza? I'm sure it would be on. I mean, anything can be found if your motives are impure.
Yeah, I'm one of those that agree. I agree with Harry that the rockets can be counterproductive, and they're met with such massive force out of proportion to the rockets themselves. When you look at the death rates and injury rates in the last two major operations against Gaza, Cast Lead and Pillar of Cloud, the numbers were definitely very, very heavy on the Gazan side and very minimal. No one should have had to die, but they were very minimal on the Israeli side. I, as many of my friends in Gaza, I agree with them that they have a right to maintain a militia to protect themselves. And they do. And I was privy to meeting some of them when we were in Gaza and seeing their demonstrations on the street. I don't think that I have a Gaza friend that wouldn't say that they should maintain that presence to protect themselves, and it probably does have an impact day to day on Gaza, only in the sense that it gives hope, for one, but second of all, it prevents an outright invasion of Gaza, which,
exactly,
if it ever happened, would be very costly to both sides, and inshallah that will not happen in the future. But I don't have any. If I was in Gaza and there was an attack, I probably would become extremely protective of people that I love. Yeah. And I'm a pacifist, and I'm a Gandhian. But you shoot my brother, I might have a totally different attitude at that particular moment to protect my other brothers and sisters and mother and cousins and whatnot. And so
Can I just say, sorry,
go ahead, Harry.
No, sorry, Denny. I thought it is absolutely the case that without the militia, as you called it, in Gaza, Gaza would be doing worse than it is now, in the sense that it would be occupied like the West Bank, and there would be less sovereignty and less autonomy. I mean, obviously there's now blockade, but in one sense, in one assessment criterion, it would be much worse. And if you even look at the war, I mean, and forgetting the casualties, without that militia, and of course the war, of course, existed because there was a militia as well. But the point is that without that militia, the war could have gone on much longer. And I think it is truism that the militia's actions, and I'm not going to describe the actions, but the militia's actions did make that operation by Israel against Gaza stop sooner than it otherwise would have done. So I think that there is definitely, it's obvious that there should be, of course, a militia or means of defense for any people, and especially people who are occupied.
Yeah,
I
agree with that, and I'm just going to be bluntly and say, I'm not supporting, terrorism, but there's a difference between somebody protecting themselves and somebody just going out and doing some bullshit and just hurting people because they want to do it.
Exactly.
And
yeah, sorry.
Go ahead.
And I just want to say, because people I think don't know this, that I mentioned this on a radio interview I did a couple of weeks back, that many of the rockets that get fired from Gaza into Israel these days, not literally these days, but in recent times outside of the wartime, are people who are going against Hamas, the de facto authorities, and even sometimes they're going against their own factional position. They are just a group of people firing rockets. And they know very well that they're kind of bloody-minded against Hamas, against the authorities. Does that make sense?
Yep, it does. I mean, to me it does.
Luna, I was gonna say something that I think should be said about everything that we've shared today, and I know that Harry will agree that the true activists that I've come to know and respect are not out to save Gaza. We're not saviors. We're supporters.
Exactly.
And we're supporters of people on the ground in Gaza who are making every attempt to to have a normal life, to have sovereignty, to have the right to make decisions about exports and imports, and the ability to fish and the ability to farm where they want to. We're supporters, and frankly, I look to Gaza for cues on how I can support. And I know that you do, and I know that Harry does. And I think there are sometimes people that wonder if we have savior complexes. We don't.
No, no, not by no
No,
means.
we have fallen in love with the people
Absolutely.
who we know are quite delightful, a country that's delightful, a place that I could easily live the rest of my life, to be honest with you. And people would say, really? I say, really? Because there's
Yeah.
something there that I don't have in my country, that's for damn sure.
It's,
My
it's, can I just add
Go
to
ahead,
that?
Harry.
Of course, I totally agree with what you said. For me, one of the key currencies to understanding the position that you just stated, which is the same as mine, is the notion of difference. You know, who's to say that we're different? We're all human beings, and when something is wrong, and we feel passionate about it, that's what we should take exception to and raise the alarm on. And I feel very strongly about that. It's wrong because we're humans. So
Yes.
that's the kind of assessment criteria. Sorry, that's not very well formulated, but
No, it
the
was
notion
great,
of
Harry. It was great.
yeah, the notion of kind of difference is often overvalued, and I'm certainly not someone who's nationalistic. And others see the Israel-Palestine situation as it's about Muslims and Jews. Well, of course, it's not that either. It's not about religions, and it's not about religious people. This is a human issue.
Exactly, exactly.
I'm sorry, just not to mention that also we're also all responsible because our governments are actually directly or indirectly responsible for this. You know,
Exactly.
no one can just say, "Oh, it's not your issue."
Yep. And you know, I'm gonna say this flat ass out. The only people that can help Gaza is the people of Gaza. People like Harry, people like Denny, people like me. All we can do is, as long as they're rising, is support them. If they, you know, if they were to give up, if every person in Gaza was to give up and there wasn't one with a voice to try to reach out to anybody, then Gaza would be the same way, the way the people of Gaza want it. As long as there are people in Gaza who are saying that we don't want to live this way and they need support, my ass is right there standing 2 feet firm, as short as I am. And if I get knocked down and just get somebody could pick me up. But the thing is that no, the complex or anyone who would think as far as any activists out of Gaza coming in on some white horse and whipping a wand around and changing everything. No, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is Gaza's going to be changed the way the people of Gaza want it to change. And frankly, to tell you the truth, the more they're going now, the louder I'm hearing people around the world be right for them. And sooner or later, these governments on any side is going to have to do something. There's going to be
This,
too. I just feel
Mm.
I feel myself that as long as we're doing something now. I mean, you know, as long as we keep doing things like this, we don't need mainstream media anymore. You know, if they don't want to cover it, fine. Then people are getting the information out different ways. So, am I trying to save Gaza? Hell yeah, I'm trying to support to save Gaza with the people of Gaza, not
right,
try to
exactly.
be. Not,
With
I think it's a matter, I don't know for me, but it's a matter of saving justice on earth. It's not about
exactly.
yes,
saving
yes,
anyone,
yes,
you
yes.
know?
You know, the term "we all are Gaza" is not just a term to make
That's exactly what I was about to say next.
it's the truth. It's the honest to
Exactly.
God's truth. We all are Gaza because we all can be are in Gaza's place one way or another, whether it's right indirectly or, you know, in a modern way of where we live. I
You know,
mean,
one of my great mentors that I was introduced to because of Gaza, who is unfortunately no longer with us, is Vittorio Arrigoni from Italy. And he summed it up with something that is written in all over Gaza on walls. It's graffiti, but is stay human. That the reason we're doing this is because we're trying to stay human in spite of everything that's happening, and trying to, I think, encourage our brothers and sisters around the world to embrace that. And Amin. But when I went to Gaza and I went outside my hotel the very first day, right across the street from Gaza was a picture of Vittorio, who is a well-loved person in Gaza still yet. Unfortunately, he died. He passed away in 2011. But I consider him a mentor in the sense that to love a people is to know a people, and a lot of the differences that we may ascribe to them, we're not so different. We're not. So, I've not met a person in Gaza who was different than me. We may have different cultural backgrounds. We may think different about marriage. We may think different about different things. We may pray in different kinds of places. But frankly, and I know Harry knows this, and Harry had the same experience, I'm sure, in Gaza, I always felt very comfortable going into mosques. Now, I would never have thought I would be comfortable going into a mosque. Never. Not because I didn't like Islam, but I just, there are times that I would go there and I would be surrounded by humanity. I would want to hide in the back of a mosque rather than become the center of attention. But almost always, the people in the mosque would bring me to the front of the mosque to pray. I'm a Christian background. I'm not a Muslim.
Right.
There's a humanity at work here that I think motivates all that we do. That we've met some really lovely people who don't match the stereotypes that we've been given. And we say, these people are worth supporting. They're worth supporting.
Right.
Amen.
Well, as far as what you just said, Denny, American to American. I mean, and I will just say it right out. Before 9/11, we didn't have. I mean, people would say, yeah, that's not a good religion or whatever, but we never had before 9/11 the bias and the arguments and the disrespect and hatred towards religions until after 9/11.
Yeah.
And this was built on, not from the people, this was built on from our government saying that was a terrorist group, they were Muslims, so all Muslims are bad. And that's the kind of shit that our government gave to Americans. And for 12 years you get Americans that's how they feel. I'm back at home and I am Muslim, and I've had people tell me, Americans, that they were going to come from Arkansas and come kick my ass and bring the bikers to beat my ass, and I'm like, okay, here's my address,
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
Here's my address, because on top of being Muslim, I also am American. And your ass will get American response if you come to my door. So,
that's unfortunate. That whole event and the way it was handled has caused a split that has no basis in reality,
yes,
unfortunately.
But then Americans also, this is another thing as far as people standing up and taking accountability. Okay, you've been to the Middle East, I've been to the Middle East, and I'm sure there's tons of supporters, activists or not even activists that don't feel this way. And if, how can I say it, a practice what you preach kind of thing?
Yeah.
That people who have been through it are the ones that should stand up, because I have gotten this question, I don't know how many times since I've been home here. Well, why don't Muslims speak up for the Muslim? What do you want me to say? You want me to talk for the people who ran the planes into the towers? The men are dead. You want me to speak for them because I'm a Muslim? I don't know what the hell was going through their head, and I'm not going to take accountability for something they did.
Yeah, this is very important.
And this is very important that people have
it really is, yeah. And sorry, no, I mean, I've been looking at the issue of Islamophobia now for 3 or 4 years, and this question of whose responsibility it is to speak up is very philosophically difficult, because on the one hand there is among the so-called quote-unquote Muslim community, as if all Muslims live in one place, there is according to some people's ideology, a responsibility for these communities to speak up against the misdemeanors of the minority. But of course that doesn't happen with the majority of populations, right? If I'm talking sense here. So it's all totally messed up, and it comes back to the same thing as with Gaza. We're all human beings. And we all have a responsibility to, as much as anyone else, that is, to speak up against injustices.
Exactly. And, you know, as a people, you know, we're like right now, there's plenty of I'm going to bring up Syria. I'm sorry. I know this is Gaza topic, but we cannot go without saying Syria. They've been there for 2 years, and there's still, you know, hundreds of people dying per day. And everybody's just, where's all the activists and the protests for this? If anybody, you know, they should have the respect and solidarity of there being all kinds of people in the street for them every once in a while with the stuff that they've taken, you know. And I feel bad sometimes to where I can't, you know, even as an activist, I got to take a break, because I don't get mad because I'm not helping or I can't do anything. I'm getting mad because the people that I feel could help are ignoring me, you know. And it's hard and it's frustrating and annoying as an activist who really knows what a one hand is, you know. You understand what I'm saying? And,
yes.
And it makes me get really upset that I'm speaking to these people as an activist. They are activists, and they're turning their back on me. That's it. That's being a hypocrite, actually, on their part, because they're gonna. And then 2 weeks later, they come and tell me, "Oh, well, we got this going on." Well, sorry about your luck. I'm over here on Syria, you know, or I'm over here on Palestine. It's just we need to figure out some kind of formula to get people united. Even if you don't agree, at least listen. If you don't think it's your business, that's fine. At least take a listen, because it might come up in a conversation somebody else, and you could say, "Oh, well, this is what I knew," you know, or "This is what I found out. This is what I heard." Or even if you listen to me, you can tell the person and direct them to me, you know. So it's a sense of people communicating and accepting, or at least listening to each other, is what I would say.
So Syria is an overwhelming situation for me sometimes. I do focus on Gaza, not because I don't think that the Syrian crisis is absolutely atrocious, inhuman, but it is more than my head can wrap around sometimes. All the deaths, especially of the children. I've read reports in the last few days of whether they're true or not. I cannot vouch for yet, but attack on town not far from Damascus where children were thrown out the windows of their buildings. Now, I hope that that wasn't true. We're dealing with some real heavy-duty issues with humanity here. I don't think we can't solve all of those, but there's some things happening there that for us to be totally silent in the West is really challenging to me personally.
Yeah, me too. It's the same as with you, Denny. Another thing which I find headbanging against the wall is that want to blame someone, and they're somehow often some people they always have to politicize everything and almost cannot meditate just on the humanitarian crisis. And with Syria, when things are so tangled and complicated and dark, I see among people who are sympathetic for the Palestinians 100 different positions among those people towards the situation in Syria. I don't know how one can do effective advocacy for Syria without, in a way, a revolution in how people see it, because things have just got so twisted
There's
and
no
messed
way.
up.
Yep, there's no way to break this now unless there's violence to fight violence. Now, I agree with you on that because it's gone too long. It's over 2 years now. There's nothing going to break that up unless there's violence, because there's too many different groups in there now, for one. Nobody knows who the hell's who. And they're all fighting each other. You know what I'm saying? It's going to take a country to go in there and split it up. It's just like two little bully kids that are stubborn and won't quit fighting. That's how I feel about it. I feel it's going to take violence to stop that violence in that country.
Yeah, the United Nations, I don't think, wants to touch it. Unfortunately, the United Nations hasn't really touched Gaza. They have issued 200 plus documents criticizing Israel. And they've not been listened to, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the Israeli government picks and chooses what it decides to listen to. So our one peacekeeping organization in the world has become somewhat ineffective because it has not come forward for Gaza or in the case of Syria. And unfortunately, that's dependent on the United States too.
Yeah.
I live here. I don't govern.
Well, you got the big bad. Yeah, I feel the same way about our government. It's like, we're supposed to be the big mama, but we ain't got Israel off the titty yet, and they need to get off the titty and protect themselves. And they suck hard.
I really haven't heard it quite said that way.
Well, I'm sorry.
But I can understand it, exactly the imagery.
I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel. I shouldn't have said it like that, but that's how I feel about it. Everybody in the world knows is that the United States is just, a big front for them. But it's like a mama who needs to, quit feeding their kid. They need to buck up a little bit. If they want to go and start arguments and fights and bully other people, then by damn it, when it comes time for them to get their ass kicked, well, you don't go up and call mommy to come save you for the day. Stop picking on people and causing havoc and stick up for yourself.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions in Gaza about American politics, although Americans are very welcome there. You can't walk down the street in Gaza, especially if you're noticed as an international, and they ask you what nationality you are, and you say, "Well, I'm from the United States." They say, "Oh, we love Americans. We love Americans. We don't like the American government, but we love Americans."
That's the way I feel about it. That's the way I feel about it.
We love Americans.
I say that all the time. I've had people say, "Well, you just hate Jews and you hate Israel," and I'm like, "No, I don't." I'm a Heinz 57. I got Mexican, white, Indian, all kinds of other stuff in me. Probably some Jewish somewhere. Why would I, in my country, to me, I've lived with racism all my life. Why would I be a racist? I says, but the thing is that you can not dislike their government and what they do. And like I said in the beginning, it's not just them. I'm not selfish. I hate them all. I don't like them because they don't, I haven't seen one government yet do absolutely what the people need, within the countries that I've been in over there. And if I'm going to talk on my others, I'll talk on my own too and let them know. That's the thing too. Americans, each country of people need to be able to admit their wrongs in their country and then admit their rights. People who do have a little bit of freedom and rights need to acknowledge the fact that they can be supporters of the ones that are dying and spilling blood to have them freedom and rights. Now, you know, I've had a lot of Americans tell me, well, why don't those people buck up and do something for themselves? Well, didn't you just see, you know, like thousands of them die over in Bahrain? Or, you know, is that not standing up for your people or standing up for your rights? So, all right, guys, this has been great. And we've been on here quite a long time. It's been, I feel, very productive interview. I want to thank you both. I want to thank you both for being on, and maybe sometime, you know, again, you can come on again.
We'd love that, and thank you for
I'd
giving us
love
an
that. I'd love
opportunity
that.
to talk about this stuff.
Right. We
I'm,
want
I'm
we want
absolutely honored. Go ahead.
we
Denny.
want to say hello to all of our friends and people in general that tuned in today, especially our friends in Gaza. We love you. That's it.
Amen.
Amen.
Or Amen.
I mean,
I mean,
oh,
I mean.
I'm copying you, Harry. Both times. Okay, everyone, we're going to close
Thank
here.
you so much again. Thank you very much for your hospitality.
I'm honored, and all of the listeners and everybody who joined us today, I want to absolutely say that I'm honored to have you all here. Thank you for your support for Gaza. If you're in Gaza now, I want to back up and say what both Harry and Denny have said. We love you, and you're not alone. And as long as you're standing tall and straight, and you need the support, we're here. I don't care if I have to jump up in the middle of the night for something, an emergency. If it needs to get out on this network, it'll be done. This is not mainstream media. I'm just like everybody else. Poor ass broke and suffering just like everybody else. But I know how to use this net and get information out. So if this network is ever needed, it's here.
We love you, Dominga. Keep up the good fight.
I love you too. All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye. We're concluding.
Have a great day,
Bye,
all.
guys.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.